Hello and welcome back to Bicyclelegs and another edition of Anniversary Albums. And today we're going to be looking at albums that are having a significant anniversary in the month of October. If you're feeling like this is a little bit of deja vu, I've already done one for October 2024. This is the second one because there just were too many albums. I couldn't leave them all out. So the first episode, which came out yesterday, covered up to and including 45th anniversaries. The episode today, we're going to be looking at 10 albums that are having a 50th, 55th or 60th anniversary in the month of October 2024. As always, please let me know in the comments which ones you think I should have included. But let's get straight into it and look at an album that is having its 60th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released on the 2nd of October 1964. Debut album by one of the all-time great British bands. I am of course talking about Kinks by the Kinks. Now this has their first massive breakthrough hit, which was You Really Got Me on it. It also has some cover versions, which is unusual for later Kinks albums. Later Kinks albums, everything would be written mostly by Ray Davies, the occasional contributions by Dave Davies. But this has a number of covers on it, like, you know, like Bald Headed Woman and Too Much Monkey Business and that sort of thing. But you've also got, you know, the wonderful You Really Got Me. You've got Beautiful Delilah. It's just a wonderful R&B beat album. You know, the Kinks would evolve and become these great storytellers. You know, I'm thinking of albums like Arthur and, you know, Lola and all that sort of thing, you know, Village Green Preservation Society. But in this first original sort of version of the Kinks, they were a raucous rock and roll band and, you know, just absolutely brilliant. And, you know, I put them absolutely up there with Beatles, Stones, Who. You know, to me that's the big foursome: Beatles, Stones, Who, Kinks. So of that sort of early to mid 60s British invasion, you know, that's where it's at for me anyway. And I love this album to death. We're going to have a look at another debut album for our next album, which is having its 50th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released on the 7th of October 1974. I am talking about the wonderful Living in the 70s by Skyhooks. Now, I have done a Skyhooks studio albums ranked with the wonderful Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation. I will leave a link to that in the description. Please do check it out if you haven't already. We both held this album in very high regard without sort of giving any spoilers for that particular episode. And rightly so too, because it's just one of the all-time classic debut albums. It is an Australian classic. It's still one of the best-selling Australian albums by an Australian artist. And, you know, just so many great songs on this album. The title track, Living in the 70s, just incredible. Whatever Happened to the Revolution might be my favourite Skyhook song. It's either that or Love's Not Good Enough off the second album. Baldwin Calling's wonderful Horror Movie, their big breakthrough hit, became a massive hit all around Australia. The cheeky You Just Like Me Because I'm Good and Bad, love that to death. Carlton, wonderful slice of Melbourne suburban life, as is Toorak Cowboy. You know, those songs are both these sort of like little vignettes about what it was like to be a young, you know, teenager to a young adult in suburban Melbourne in the 70s. And there really wasn't anybody else here in Australia doing that sort of thing. And that's what made Skyhooks so, so special. You've got Red Simon's wonderful song Smut, which is just an absolute laugh riot, that song. But musically, very complex, really interesting song. It's a really, really good song. And then it closes out with Hey What's the Matter and Motorcycle Bitch. Just a terrific album. If you've never listened to Skyhooks, this is a great place to start. I would definitely recommend this to you. Especially if you like that sort of, gritty 70s glam rock kind of sound. Lots of guitars, just twin guitars and that sort of thing. It's great stuff. Next album we're going to have a look at is having its 55th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released on the 10th of October, 1969. And that is Hot Rats by Frank Zappa. Mostly instrumental, except for the wonderful Willie the Pimp, where the vocals are by Captain Beefheart. A lot of this music is Frank Zappa getting into sort of jazz fusion mode, especially wonderful things like Peaches and Regalia, Son of Mr. Green Jeans, and then on side 2 you've got Little Umbrellas, you've got the wonderful gumbo variations, long track, lots of wonderful soloing and that sort of thing, and then It Must Be a Camel. It's just great. One thing I'll say about this album, I for ages thought that was actually Frank on the front cover, just with makeup on. But just goes to show what I know. But I love this album to death. This album was very popular in the UK for some reason. It's like his big hit album in the UK. I think it's a terrific album. It's definitely the sort of Zappa I love, because I'm really into that sort of instrumental jazz fusion kind of Zappa. Albums like The Grand Wazoo and Waka Jawaka, which is pretty much a sequel to Hot Rats. Those sort of albums, that's the stuff. That's the Zappa stuff I really, really love. So, terrific album. We're going to go for another absolutely all-time classic debut album for our next pick. Celebrating its 55th anniversary in the month of October, also the same day as Hot Rats, released on the 10th of October 1969. What a day that must have been to be a record buyer. And I am talking about In the Court of the Crimson King by King Crimson. I've done a King Crimson studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description, as I will indeed, I forgot to mention, I've got a Frank Zappa top 10. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. I mean, what can you say about In the Court of the Crimson King that hasn't already been said? Just an incredible album. Iconic album cover. Just absolutely brilliant. I mean, it starts off with the iconic 21st Century Schizoid Man. Just a brilliant, one of the first really heavy songs. Then you get the absolutely gentle, fragile, brittle I Talk to the Wind. And I absolutely adore how Schizoid Man comes to this complete cacophonous crescendo. And then it stops, and then immediately, without time to breathe, you get these gentle flutes starting off I Talk to the Wind. It's just the first time I heard that, just blew my mind. Just incredible stuff. You have the incredible epitaph. I mean, a lot of people have said that is Greg Lake's finest vocal performance ever, and it's hard to disagree with that. Then on side 2 you have the beautiful, fragile, aching Moonchild, which starts off with this lovely little song and then goes into this long but very delicate improvisation between Robert Fripp, Ian MacDonald and Michael Giles. And, when I first heard it, I don't think I appreciated it. These days, I think it's one of the absolute masterpieces on this album. I don't think there are any bad tracks on this album. It closes off with The Court of the Crimson King. Just epic and grandiose. And this band came out of the blocks fully formed. It's one of the all-time greatest debut albums. It is not necessarily my favourite King Crimson album, as you'll see if you look at my King Crimson studio albums ranked. But that's not to say that this album is not one of the most, incredible debuts, one of the most influential debut albums of all time. You know, progressive music probably did exist before this album, but to me, this is the album that really kick-started the progressive movement. So make of that what you will. It's an absolute masterpiece. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released on the 11th of October 1974, and that is Street Life Serenade by Billy Joel. Now, I've also done a Billy Joel studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. Indeed, I've also done a Billy Joel favourite song from each album with the wonderful Davey Cretin. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. This album came surprisingly high on my studio albums ranked. It's, to me, the great underrated gem in the Billy Joel catalogue. You know, the wonderful title track, or almost title track, it's called Street Life Serenade. Just great. Los Angelinos, real great rocking song with some wonderful electric piano from Billy. The Great Suburban Showdown, Root Beer Rag, you know, one of his great instrumentals. He didn't do a lot of instrumentals, and I kind of wish he did more, because he's a great instrumentalist as well as being a great singer and songwriter. Roberta's beautiful. The Entertainer, possibly my favourite Billy Joel song of all time. Just such a sarcastic, witty song with some wonderful synthesizer playing from Billy on it as well. Last of the Big Time Spenders is great. Weekend Song, Souvenir, and The Mexican Connection. I mean, just really, if you've never checked this particular Billy Joel album out, it gets a high recommendation from me. As I say, to me, the lost gem of his catalogue. Doesn't get talked about enough. I think it's one of his finest albums. The next album we're going to have a look at is also having its 50th anniversary in the month of October. It was released 1 week later after Street Life Serenade on the 18th of October 1974. And that is It's Only Rock and Roll by the Rolling Stones. Now, I've done a couple of Rolling Stones studio albums ranked shows. I did a 60s one here on my channel with Peter Kerr, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. But we also did a 70s up to 1981 studio albums ranked of the Rolling Stones, you know, almost their classic period, if you will, over on Rock Daydream Nation, and I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. This album, I feel like, you know, even the title feels like they're kind of, you know, trying to pull expectations back a little bit, you know, like it's only rock and roll, you know, don't expect, you know, I don't know what they're saying, but I still think this is a really good album. I don't know if it's quite up to that classic period that came just before it, but there's still some really great songs on here. You know, If You Can't Rock Me, you know, the cover of Ain't Too Proud to Beg, the title track, you know, one of their great singles, I think. Till the Next Goodbye, Time Waits for No One, Dance Little Sister. Really love that. If You Really Want to Be My Friend, Short and Curlies. Yeah. And Fingerprint File. Yeah. All in all, this would be the last album with Mick Taylor. He would leave the band after this one. But I think it's a really fine Rolling Stones album. Maybe not top echelon Stones, but still definitely worth owning, definitely worth hearing. The next album we're going to have a look at is another debut album, and it is having its 60th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released all the way back on the 19th of October 1964, and that is Wednesday Morning 3 a.m. by Simon and Garfunkel. Now, I've done a Simon and Garfunkel studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description. This album is different from all the albums that would follow it because this is a straight, pure folk album. Most of it is just acoustic guitar and those wonderful, wonderful harmony vocals. There would be a couple of little extra instruments here and there, but it definitely didn't have any of the rock feel that the folk rock feel that their later stuff would have. And of course, the other thing about this is, like Bob Dylan's first album, there are a lot of traditional songs on this. Only a few of these are Paul Simon originals. But the ones that are Paul Simon originals are just absolutely wonderful. Things like Bleecker Street, Sparrow. You've got the original version of The Sounds of Silence on here with no drums or guitar or electric guitar or bass. It's just acoustic guitar and Simon and Garfunkel singing those beautiful, beautiful harmonies. He Was My Brother is another great original, and Wednesday Morning 3 a.m, the title track. But you've also got traditional songs like You Can Tell the World and Benedictus and Peggy-O and Go Tell It on the Mountain. The Sun is Burning, beautiful, wonderful, really poignant song about nuclear warfare and that sort of thing. You've got a great cover version of Dylan's The Times They Are A-Changing. Might be my favourite version of that song, is Simon and Garfunkel's. It's a terrific album. If you don't know it, if you only know the sort of Simon and Garfunkel hits, definitely check this album out because I think it's great. The next album we're going to have a look at is having its 50th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released on the 22nd of October 1974. It is the second album by this iconic New York band, and that is Hotter Than Hell by Kiss. I know this is a lot of people's favourite Kiss album. It's definitely a top 5 Kiss album for me, but I tend to be a little contrarian when it comes to Kiss albums. I like some of the later stuff a bit, better and that sort of thing. Like, when I say later, I mean I'm talking like early 80s. But yeah, I mean, this is undeniably a classic. The only thing that brings this album down is the production is muddy. It's really not a good production at all. But the songs, just great songs. Gotta Choose, great opening song. Parasite, Going Blind, Hotter Than Hell, Let Me Go Rock and Roll. Great kick-ass rockin' song. All the Way, Watching You, classic Kiss song. Absolutely classic. Mainline is great. Coming Home. I remember Coming Home, that was the first song that they did in their Unplugged set. And I thought, that's a bit of a left field choice because it's not a song that they played a lot in concert and that sort of thing, but it's a great choice. I love that song. And the acoustic version's really, really good. And then Strange Ways to close the album out. Just absolutely wonderful. Early Kiss is great Kiss. A lot of fun. I mean, you're not looking for, great art with Kiss, but they're a lot of fun. And they're great rock and roll. And if that's what you're looking for, this is a great place to come and find it. The next album we're going to have a look at is also having its 50th anniversary in the month of October. It was released on the 25th of October 1974. A lot of people consider this to be one of the 2 albums that are like all-time career highlights for this band. I'm talking about Crime of the Century by Supertramp. It's this one and Breakfast in America, isn't it? Those are the 2 albums that everybody remembers when they think of Supertramp. And this album is different from Breakfast in America because, some of the songs are a little longer, a little more extended. Some people called Supertramp progressive rock. I don't know that I'd go that far. They definitely had some progressive leanings. But yeah, I mean, the songs on this album are just so good. School, what a great album opener. Bloody Well Right, big hit for them in the US. Hide in Your Shell, Asylum. Dreamer was the big hit in Europe and I think here as well. And an all-time classic. Just start the beginning of that song and everybody knows it. Rudy, if everyone was listening, the title track. What an incredible song to close the album out. You know, this album was the making of Supertramp. It was the first album they did with the classic lineup. And it was their first hit album. Their first two albums really hadn't sold very many records. So this was the making of this band. And rightly so. It's an all-time classic. Great, great album. And then the last album we're going to have a look at is celebrating its 55th anniversary in the month of October. It was originally released on the 29th of October 1969. Quite far from being a debut album, this is the third album that this band released just in 1969. Just incredible. I am, of course, talking about Willie and the Poor Boys by Cretin's Clearwater Revival. If you're a regular viewer of this series, you will know that the other two albums that they released in this year, which were Green River and I'm blanking on the other one, but they've all featured in these anniversary album shows. And, you know, rightly so. I mean, what a fertile period of creativity it was for this band, and for John Fogerty in particular, being the main writer of the band. I mean, you've got some wonderful classics on this album, like Down on the Corner and Fortunate Son, which open side 1 and side 2 respectively. But you've also got their wonderful version of the Midnight Special. You've got, you know, It Came Out of the Sky. You've got their version of Cotton Fields, Poor Boy Shuffle, Feelin' Blue, Effigy, Side of the Road. Just absolutely classic Creedence Clearwater Revival. If their sound is something that appeals to you, this album will be one of your favourites. I have no doubt about that. I've done a Creedence Clearwater Revival studio albums ranked. I'll leave a link to that in the description, so please do check that out if you haven't already. So there you have it, 10 more albums having anniversaries in the month of October, this time 50th, 55th and 60th anniversaries. Please let me know in the comments which albums of these you love, maybe which ones you don't care so much, and please do let me know what 50th, 55th or 60th or maybe even older anniversary albums you have that you think I should have included, because I love when you give me all those suggestions. It makes me kick myself sometimes that I didn't think of those albums, or sometimes they were ones that were on my longer list, but mostly it just makes me go out and want to listen to those albums, so thank you. And please do check out part 1 of this one, where I looked at albums up to and including 45th anniversary. That show came out yesterday. I'll leave a link to that in the description as well. So please do check that episode out if you haven't already. Please do like, share and subscribe. It really does help the channel out. If you're new to the channel, please go and have a look at some of my other videos. I have everything playlisted, so if you want to have a look at some of my other anniversary album shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see some of my favourite albums of all time shows, I have a playlist for those. If you want to see my appearances on other people's channels, like the aforementioned Rock Daydream Nation, I also have a playlist for those. If you want to follow me on social media, I'm at bicyclelegs on Instagram, Twitter and a bunch of other places. I also have a dedicated bicyclelegs Facebook page. Links are all in the doobly-doo. Please do give those all a follow and join in the conversation. I'd really love to have you there. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.